Morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is James Meyer, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Mainer Moments, Business Insights for the Restaurant Industry. This is the second of a four-part series of informative 20 to 25-minute discussion. Today's topic is how to remain profitable when sales are down. With me today is Greg Thomas. Greg is the CEO and founder of CFO Advisors and a nationally recognized restaurant industry expert. Over the last 25 years, he's been the acting CFO and trusted advisor of over 50 restaurant and retail companies across the United States. His financial leadership and industry expertise has made a positive impact on the growth and success of numerous brands. To give you a little background on myself, I'm a principal in the Business Solutions and Technology Department of Mainer Costerisan, which is a regional CPA firm based in Michigan. I head up our restaurant practice, and I have over 30 years of experience helping multi-unit brands with their IT technology and financial accounting software needs. Greg and I are very excited to be here today to talk about this important topic. So let's get started. Before we talk about the solution, we thought it would be helpful to talk a little bit about the problem. Greg, in your experience, what are the key factors that are causing declining sales?
Well, good morning. I normally see factors really grouped into four different buckets. The first bucket would be that the restaurant, the management team is simply not responding quickly to the guests' wants and needs. It could be poor choice of product, not listening to the guests. The second bucket is just a bad experience, poor service, poor food, poor environment. The third bucket, competition and lack of differentiation, and we certainly know that that's going on in a major way today in all the markets around the country. And then the fourth bucket is really external forces, things like road closures, that type of thing that might be affecting guests actually getting to the restaurant.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's always an issue. So if I could summarize it a little bit, it's usually one or more of the following. What you're saying is it's not responding to the needs. It's poor service or environment, food, competition, or external forces, like you said. I mean, that big one is like road construction. We see that happen all the time. So if those factors are impacting your restaurant and you're faced with declining sales and profitability, what do you do, right? To answer that, we thought it would be helpful to walk through a real-life case study of a company that Greg and I have helped. And this company is a casual dining. It's basically a pizzeria and grill, and they've got 10 locations. And the owner's looking to grow, but they're struggling, and he's struggling financially. He's struggling with some other issues. So Greg, again, why don't you tell us a little bit about what were some of the challenges that they were facing when you first met with the owner?
Well, so to preface that, James, I think that declining sales obviously lead to declining profits, but it's not always because the costs are high. I mean, certainly is part of it, but I just want to reemphasize that it's not always a cost situation, and you can't save yourself the profitability over the long term. So it's really trying to identify of those four areas what's going wrong. And in this particular situation, this group did not have access to their data at all. So the starting point is always find out what's going wrong and identify it. Identify if it's a real issue. And they weren't able to do that because they couldn't see through their data. They didn't know where the issue was coming from. So that was
right.
the first issue. So the first step we took was to identify the streams of data that they had. You know, where's it coming from? What point of sale do they have? How do we get the data? And is it organized correctly? Is it clean? And can anybody understand it? They had 10 locations, people doing different things. General managers in each location were more responsible for reporting in than anybody in home office, taking more of a decentralized versus centralized approach. So it was very decentralized. And so we had issues with information not being correct coming over to home office, and no one really understanding just the basics, like what constitutes a guest count. So if you really want to know if your guests are coming or going up or down, you can't figure it out if you don't know what a guest is. So that was the first challenge, was to get the data, clean it up, get some definitions in place, get everybody on the same page, and then concentrate the data streams into one spot.
Right. So how do you do that?
Well, it's easy and it's hard. The easy part is identifying the source. A tremendous amount of information comes from the point of sale. There's a tremendous amount of information comes from the distributor, whether it be a US Foods or Cisco or somebody like that. And those are probably the two primary data streams to go after immediately. The point of sale data, if you have an enterprise system, you can try to obtain it from there. You can quickly obtain it from there to get going. And then at some point down the road, move into more of an AboveStore system. The distributor data, you can get that just by asking the distributor to start sending it to you in Excel format. And from there, you can start to look and see, okay, from a cost standpoint, am I going up or down the price of my proteins, for instance? Do I have a contract?
Right.
Are they adhering to the contract? And then the other part is just to see what's selling. And you can see that in distributor data as well, and see if your costs are in line for what your pricing is on your menu. So there's a variety of ways to go about it, but those are the two biggest pieces of data that we can get our hands on quickly.
Right. You mentioned at the beginning there, you talked about if you have an enterprise system and eventually into an AboveStore system. And I think most people know what that means, but can you kind of explain what you mean by that for those that don't know?
So if I were to go out and purchase Aloha, for instance, for my restaurants, and this group did have Aloha, they did not have an enterprise system. Each separate restaurant with a separate Aloha database did not speak to the others, and there was no way of concentrating that in the home office. So to find out what each restaurant was doing, you had to physically dial into every single one of the 10 point of sale systems. An enterprise system, whether it be Aloha or Micros or whoever, consolidates all that information, gives you a one-stop shop to get it. An AboveStore system is a little bit more advanced. It has theoretical food costing, inventory, labor scheduling, that type of thing, in all in one spot that pulls the data from the POS.
Well, you know my background. I'm a financial accounting software guy, so I understand that the POS, obviously the POS information and the distributor information is key. But what about the accounting information?
The accounting information, if it's correct coming out of the point of sale and out of the accounting department, provides more trending over time. I can see what my food cost is, for instance, over several periods next to each other. I can see what's trending. I can see what's happening with my sales categories. I can see what's happening perhaps with food versus beverage. But a lot of groups, and this group in particular, did not have their accounting information broken down by any kind of granular segments. You couldn't tell what was happening within the breakfast versus lunch versus dinner day part. You couldn't tell what was happening with the weekdays. And that's where the solutions are, is trying to identify what's happening to my guests, what's happening to my sales in an individual day part on a particular day. So the accounting system can't provide that, but it can give you more high-level trending on some of the costs. So that's why you really need to dive into the detail of the point of sale.
Right. No, I get it. And you mentioned that they had separate Aloha systems for each store, and it was the same thing for them on the financial side because they had separate QuickBooks files for every store, and so they didn't have visibility across that either. So, okay, so then what comes next?
Well, once you have that information and you've decided that it looks correct and you're getting it on a regular basis, now the idea is to start looking for significant trends. And the way we did it with this group was to break it down by day part. We wanted to look into what was more profitable or what had the higher sales. Let's go there first. Whether it was lunch, dinner, and breakfast, or whether it was, this group has a big pizza element, what was happening on their takeout pizza side. So we started exploring that to see if we could identify trends based on the product mix that was selling in each one of those categories. Once we had that information, then we started working with the marketing department to go after what can we do to move the needle in one of these day parts or one of these days. Now, I can't tell you exactly how we found it, but we probably found that like a Wednesday dinner was suffering compared to the other dinners during the week. So going after a Wednesday dinner with certain promotions, etc., is what we essentially did with this group.
That makes sense. I know when I was talking to the owner the other day, he was saying that he basically has a dashboard with some key metrics that he looks at. He looks at that every day and he makes decisions based on that. And he said that's just had a huge impact on their profitability because he can make adjustments to labor and food costs, etc. It is now you guys helped him set up those metrics, right?
We did. Yes, we did. And they went from a company, as you mentioned, with QuickBooks and 10 separate instances and 10 separate point of sale systems that weren't talking to each other, to a company that has so much data. It's incredible. And it's organized in such a fashion where the owner can, for the most part, pull a lever and see the impact pretty quickly. And so some of the key metrics that were set up, that were identified throughout this whole process, which are fairly standard in the industry, we were looking at price average, so the PPA. We looked at the transaction average to see if the groups that we're ordering were growing or not. Those were two things we looked at. And we looked at it by day part. We're also looking at pizza delivery sales by day part. Some of those things where you can directly impact what you're seeing today and see the result tomorrow.
Right. I mean, that's the key, right? It's got to be actionable. It's not just seeing the data, but it's the data that I can actually act on and make adjustments quickly. Because if you can't make them quickly, it doesn't do you any good, right?
Yeah, and in their case, they were able to do things like watch their pizza sales or in-store pizza sales and put promotional items on the pizzas and strike a different price for them and see how the guests reacted. And they were finding there were trends based on what they were doing on the promotions that were leading to higher sales because of it.
Yeah, that's great. So that was a huge impact for them. I know that they are in a totally different situation now than they were when we started working with them in that. One of the other things that I know we did for them is their original accounting system, and part of that's because of the limitations of QuickBooks. They wanted to have 13 4-week periods, and they couldn't do that. So they couldn't. Their financials didn't tie into really the what the standard is for what you want in a retail restaurant situation, right?
Right, and we completely changed our chart of accounts to make it more industry standard. A number of the restaurants really were using different charts of accounts. I mean, it was the same chart of accounts, but they were using different accounts for the same types of items, and it was really hard to see across the system in terms of what people were spending and how one restaurant compared to another. So that got cleaned up as part of this whole process. That's really, really important. And then to be able to, go on 13 periods or some form of a fiscal where that you have the same number of weeks in every period and you can compare accurately. And the last part of that, which I think is really, really significant, is trying to get the accounting people to spend less time in accounting and more time reviewing. And by going to the accounting system that they went to and getting off of QuickBooks and getting away from having to export into Excel to be able to create consolidated financials. That all was taken care of automatically. It freed up time for the accounting staff to up their game and spend more time reviewing invoices, reviewing what's going on, and be part of the solution as opposed to just being historical data recorders.
Yeah, exactly. What accounting system did they go to?
They went to Intact, which is a great system for the restaurant industry. The ability to spread things wherever you want and go across multiple periods of time without having any issues.
Yeah, and they have visibility across all their locations.
They do, and it's web-based, so you can be anywhere in the country looking at your financials throughout the day or throughout the week, as opposed to having to dial into a site somewhere and get it.
Right, yeah. In fact, I know the owner was telling me that he pulls that up on his phone every morning and looks at his metrics and stats. So it's pretty exciting stuff. So anything else?
Well, I think the last piece there, and we touched on it briefly, is you've got to get to the M piece quickly, which is actionable data and actionable strategy, and actually do something with it and watch what you're doing. So if you can't measure it, you can't affect it. And we did that in a big way with them. We made sure that we didn't have too many things that we were tracking. We didn't go after too many areas. It was take an area, identify what the key metric is for that particular area, come up with a couple of ideas to solve the sales side, hopefully at the same time look at the costing of it to affect that, but chase it to ground, conquer it before you move on to the next item. And with that kind of a strategy over a number of months, he was able to really start to see the progress. And I think that's really important that the owner sees progress right out of the gate. And it's not a year before they can actually see any effect.
Right. But at the same time, it's a journey. It's not instant. You got to come up with, you have to have a strategy and you got to execute on that strategy, and then over time you refine it, right?
Correct. There are significant wins up front that you can have. There is low hanging fruit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in this case, like I say, I mean, this is a quote from the owner that I put up here on this, and essentially, like Greg was saying, they wanted to be able to use their data, and they couldn't do that because they had all this data, but they had no way of really pulling that data together and making it meaningful for them. So by doing that, though, and by being able to go in and compare costs, measure changes from promotions like Greg was talking about, it really has made a huge difference for them. And when I talk about it being a journey, this is a quote from the owner. He says, "We're just getting started here," and he's got big plans. And I think that he's now in a position where he really can grow, and he can grow profitably, and he's not going to be impact these causes that cause declining sales and profitability. He can tackle them quickly and react to them to make things good. So with that, why don't we just summarize here? You know, we want to give you a takeaway from today that there's 4 key steps to what I call profitability. Greg, do you want to kind of just summarize and go through these?
To summarize, discovery, which is identifying where your data is at, how to get it, and quickly trying to understand it and get to the low-hanging fruit. That's number 1. And number 2 is once you have the data and it's making some sense, to figure out what it should be and how you might be able to correct it. That's where the analytics comes into play. The analytics is all about finding trends and finding those opportunities within the information that then converts into step 4, which is what are my actionable strategies that I can employ to make an impact now from what I've found.
Right. The one thing I would add to that is that in all of this, you got to make sure you've got the right systems and software to let you do that. So essentially the right technology. So that's the other piece of this, is tying that in with the right systems. All right. Well, thank you, Craig. And thank you, everybody, for sitting in today. We hope this was helpful for you. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to contact me. And if it's a question for Greg, I can pass those on to Greg, and we can make sure that it's get back to you. Well, thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.